Good morning, dear Commandant, dear Generals, dear Excellencies, dear Dean. I trust that you had a lovely evening yesterday. I was a little quick on the draw this morning, but I'm excited to be back with you for day 2 of our 12th iteration of the annual conference on Russia. And it's become quite an exciting tradition to have a course participant panel each year. So I'd like to introduce the moderator of the student panel this year, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel McManus, who was our Army War College Fellow here at the Baltic Defense College. Lieutenant Colonel McManus has an extensive operational and academic experience from his distinguished career in the United States Army, including deployments in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, New Dawn, Enduring Freedom, and Inherent Resolve. He has served in leadership roles across Special Forces and Joint Operations, and most recently, he's commanded a basic combat training battalion at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. Lieutenant Colonel McManus holds degrees in economics and Russian from the United States Military Academy and the Strategic Security Studies from the National Defense Academy. Lieutenant Colonel McManus, without further ado, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Louis, very much for that great introduction. Good morning, attendees. This is another great day. Start off with the student panel here, and the second day of the Russia conference. And the student panel we put together has students from the Higher Command Studies course, as well as the Joint Command and Staff course participating up here. So much of yesterday was focused on the political and strategic level. Today we're going to start off at the operational level and focus in on one of the Alliance's strengths there at the operational level, where we have direct military to military coordination, cooperation, military education, as you see here, and sharing lessons learned to ultimately deliver combat power against our adversaries to deter and defeat our enemies. The student panel will be discussing those operational lessons learned, each with a focus on what we've taken away from the war of aggression in Ukraine, of what we brought back to our militaries, of lessons that we're now applying for across the board. So I'll get started down on the far left, introducing our panel. We have down there is Lieutenant Colonel Tomas Butranas, who is an officer in the Lithuanian Armed Forces. Lieutenant Colonel Butranas is a seasoned officer of 27 years in military service, 22 of which were dedicated to Lithuanian Armed Forces Special Operations. He currently serves as the commander of the LAFSOF Training and Combat Support Center, having previously commanded the Special Missions Unit from 2021 to 2025. Lieutenant Colonel Baltrunas is a graduate of the Baltic Defense College and the Latvian National Defense Academy. Since 2025, he has been a doctoral student in political science at the Military Academy of Lithuania. He has extensive operational background that includes multiple combat deployments to Afghanistan between 2004 and 2015 as part of the NATO-led mission. He is currently a student in the Higher Command Studies course. To his left, we have Major James Shoup. He is an U.S. Army officer with extensive operational experience across Europe and in the Pacific. He has served with 1st Cavalry Division in Forward Land Forces roles across Poland and the Baltic states, focused on deterrence, multinational integration, and NATO land force operations along the Alliance eastern flank. Previously, he served as a targeting officer in the 3rd Multi-Domain Task Force, where he worked on intelligence to fires integration, cross-domain targeting, and time-sensitive decision-making in contested environments. He holds an MBA in logistics, providing a strong foundation in sustainment, force design, and operational planning. He is currently a student in the Joint Command and General Staff course at the BDC. Next, we have Major Almanis Senevičius. He is an officer in the Lithuanian Armed Forces as well, with experience in both military service and teaching. He has worked as a lecturer at the Lithuanian Military Academy and holds a master's degree in political science. Besides his military duties, he is part of the Civil Defense and Security Analysis Center, Locked and Loaded, where he studies lessons from the Russian-Ukrainian war and their effects on the current defense policies and military practices. He is currently also a student in the Joint Command and General Staff course. Finally, we have Major Yaroslav Vasilyuk, is an officer in the Armed Forces of Ukraine. He has served as a research fellow at the National Defense University of Ukraine with 4 years of experience in infantry brigades. He brings practical knowledge and field experience to the academic stage, and he is also a student in the CGSC course. So to get started, without any further ado, we'll pass it off to Major James Shoup, who's going to present his topic.
There should be slides, so there we go. Okay, cool. All right, put that there. Bear with me. As a native speaker, I tend to talk pretty fast, and my colleagues would tell me the same. Lieutenant Colonel McManus, thank you for the introduction, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time this morning. I'll begin with a brief explanation of professional baseball, then try to show you how we've learned it to tie its lessons to innovation in the conduct of war, as we've seen in recent conflicts. Baseball is a simple game. You hit the ball, you run the bases, and you score points. But the season is long, over 160 games across 6 months. And you don't win because of one perfect play. You win because your team performs consistently over time. Over a season, that means scoring more runs than your opponent. In baseball, like most professional sports, teams operate under very different budgets. Rich teams can buy star players, your Babe Ruths, your Derek Jeters, your Shohei Ohtanis. Smaller teams like the Oakland Athletics in 2002 simply could not compete on a budget-for-budget basis. As you can see from the chart on the left-hand side, the $100 million payroll of the New York Yankees was simply not applicable to the Oakland Athletics, as you see in red. Moneyball wasn't and really isn't about who could buy the most expensive players or sell the most tickets, although conventional wisdom would argue that those metrics make great teams. It was about which team could allocate resources most effectively under real constraints. The key insight was that the A's general manager, Billy Beane, stopped asking who looked like an impressive baseball player based on conventional wisdom provided by his, again, expert scouts. Instead, he asked a different question: who actually produces points repeatedly and consistently for the least amount of money? In military terms, this means asking a different question. How much battlefield effect can be generated per unit of cost? That means measuring things like cost exchange ratios, cost per operational effect, or really cost per serviceable target, attrition efficiency, and really replacement rate, and then production scalability. If I have to produce 7,000 tanks, that's going to take time. These measures help determine which capabilities consistently generate pressure and outcomes over time, rather than simply which platform appears most impressive individually. In other words, modern warfare is becoming less about a platform superiority and more about efficiency. And the Athletics approach worked. The Oakland Athletics set the American League record with 20 consecutive wins. This was an impressive mark no American League team had ever reached before. This proved that the A's, on the left, could compete with the blockbuster teams to their right of the chart. Before I talk about Ukraine or Jones, I want to be clear that this isn't an argument about a specific platform, but about capabilities that create sustained pressure at acceptable costs. Ukraine has provided the first large-scale example of this logic in modern warfare and highlights this exact problem in defense planning for small and large states. What makes this moment different is the convergence of several technology trends in robotics, artificial intelligence, sensors, advanced manufacturing, and now commercial space infrastructure. Together, these technologies enable large families of generally inexpensive systems that can now challenge traditional military platforms. As my professor, Dr. Tochi, first explained, there's a direct correlation between size, time, personnel, and skill constraints, and how resources must be applied to build a winning team. In other words, armed forces capabilities management is both an art and a science now. On the right is the most recent unclassified relative defense budget data from smallest to largest. Your larger powers and your mid-tier defense budgets are shown in blue on the right, with the Baltic states highlighted in red. It's not political, it's a structural reality. Smaller states operate with orders of magnitude less money than the Yankees or the Red Sox of the National Defense Forces. Even as countries approve bigger budgets all the time in NATO, small states are continually having to figure out how to do more with less. The bottom line is that small states must still play and win in the same league, but cannot afford to do so under the same constraints imposed by the wealthier or the larger teams. Small states cannot buy what simply looks good the way large states can. They have to buy what actually scores points. Like small baseball teams, small state budgets make it clear that they cannot afford everything and are not going to be able to match platform per platform, tube for tube. But they don't have to. A single exquisite rocket that produces one potentially strategic effect could instead fund hundreds or thousands of systems, sensors, or even C2 that could generate or manage comparable effects at scale. These capabilities are described as second-tier precision strike. They sit between expensive precision munitions and traditional artillery. They're not perfect weapons, but they're affordable enough to be used in large numbers. In practice, they actually hedge against the scarcity of high-end munitions, allowing small state militaries to maintain pressure even when those finite systems are unavailable. Ukraine lessons show that modern warfare require accepting asymmetry and design forces around that asymmetry. It's not about winning a single game or a tactical engagement anymore. It's about maintaining tempo and creating operational and strategic success. More importantly, it creates pressure that small states can sustain at scale. Simply put, integrated sensors and strike systems create an asymmetric problem set that an adversary can no longer afford to ignore. The lesson from Ukraine is that cheap systems always produce decisive results. The lesson is that they consistently force an adversary to act. Unclassified assessments suggest that drones often have relatively low single success attack rates, while modern SHORAD systems can be more effective depending on the time and condition. The point here is not lethality, though that metric in this sense does matter, but that affordable, scalable capabilities pose difficult operational and strategic problems for an adversary due to cost and production mismatches, and it's becoming more and more apparent even today. As you can see from the graphs at the bottom that my colleagues are covering up, FPVs and simple drones can cost hundreds to thousands of dollars, while SHORAD and SAM interceptors often cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to counter them. A $500 drone is being struck down by a $50,000 missile. This dynamic also creates an important strategic reality. Large states possess more resources overall, but also have more territory, infrastructure, and military assets to defend. Sustained low-cost attacks can stretch those systems across a much wider geographic area, and that mismatch matters. Defense is more expensive, harder to replace, and must be sustained continuously. Pressure is not about perfect lethality. What matters is that defending against many low-cost systems requires repeatedly deploying far more expensive interceptors, a dynamic we see now in Ukraine and most recently in the Middle East. Russia may be willing to absorb heavy losses, but willingness does not remove structural constraints. It highlights where they must accept the risks. They're still in the same league, playing the same game, operating with production limits and defensive requirements. These themes create the leverage and decision advantage that Moneyball can provide to small state militaries. For NATO, this logic highlights the importance of force differentiation across the alliance. Some states may specialize in high-end systems that protect what must not fail, while others can invest in scalable precision systems that create persistent pressure. Together, those capabilities reinforce each other rather than compete with each other. In the end, the side that maximizes battlefield effects per dollar spent, not simply the side with the most advanced platforms, gains the advantage. Simply put, the Money Baltic approach enables small states to apply tailored capabilities and metrics to win in a league filled with your New York Yankees and your Boston Red Sox, like the Oakland Athletics. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, James. There's a lot to think about there. I think we're seeing that play out every day. We'll move on to Ominous and his presentation before.
Yep. Good morning, everybody. Slide, please. So I will talk slower than Jim, definitely. In the slide, you can see Russian deep strike capabilities currently. So I will explain the symbols. So the solid line diamonds indicates operating launch sites and airfields. The dashed line diamonds indicates possible additional launch sites in the hypothetical war against NATO. The red circle indicates the area affected by Russian deep strike capabilities every single day in Ukraine. So mainly it's the whole Ukraine. Red dashed circles indicates areas of equal size in Europe. For example, the Bosphorus Strait, the Danish Strait, or, for example, Germany as a NATO logistical hub for the eastern flank. So let's imagine that this year, a ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine is signed. However, the Russian narrative, which they are spreading among the Russian population, that the Great Russia is fighting the holy war against Europe and NATO, will still be there. So from the strike and production comparison, which also I think you cannot see, but maybe someone in the side screens. So From this strike and production comparison in the bottom left corner of the slide, we can assume that Russia will continue producing around 200 missiles and about 6,000 long-range strike drones per month. In this field, Russia doesn't need to wait 2 years to rebuild its capabilities, as in the land domain. The average of missiles, long-range strike drones, and gliding bombs you see in the top right corner of the slide can already be achieved in the first days after the ceasefire agreement in the red dashed circle areas, but not only there. So, rhetorical question, are we as NATO ready to counter air threats in such a huge area with such intensity as the Russians are attacking Ukraine? Ukrainian officials have publicly confirmed that Russian forces have been using Belarusian telecommunication infrastructure to support drone operations, including incursions that reached NATO airspace, and that these were deliberate Russian actions rather than accidents. In the top left corner of the slide, you can see the principal, let's call it Russian deep strike tactical pattern. Such example can be found every week or every 10 days. So the circle is quite simple. After a massive combined strike day, there is always an accumulation day, after which the Russians conduct so-called recon by force, or in Russian it's разведка боем, and then launching another massive attack. So, and of course, everything, all the cycle is supported by long-range intel drones. So if we look at the Russian targeting, so the main categories we can group, it's mainly 3. So those related to the will to fight. For example, we can observe that an energy sector is one of those. Objects related to economy, for example, Odessa seaport, and of course military objects, so headquarters, military storage facilities, and etc. So main takeaways or the lessons identified, I have 5. So the first one, that civilian infrastructure, energy facilities, hospitals, markets, and other objects must be protected from Russian deep strike operations to avoid civilian deaths and social political tensions in the societies. So not just mission vital infrastructure or critical national infrastructure, but also the other objects. Second point, our deep strike operations must be one of the countermeasures. And that's why we need cheaper deep strike tools, like drones, non-sophisticated missiles, and so on. Well, because in today's Russian attritional warfare, the mass matters. Countability matters. So the third one, a more flexible air defense is needed. So I know everybody maybe know that we cannot shoot Patriot system or NASAM missile to a Shahed drone because it's not, like from Jim's presentation, we saw that it's not efficient, not effective, not sufficient. So what can we use? We can use air defense drones against drones. And I saw in the news that Americans already talking with Ukrainians about this because of the Middle East war. Fourth, countermeasures against enemy long-range intel drones is crucial. If they don't have eyes, they cannot hit. And last but not the least, let's call it small air defense. So, like mobile groups, manpads, electronic warfare, acoustic systems, which could become crucial because the big and expensive tools won't work for a long perspective. And maybe even starting from the infantry company level. That's conclude my part. Thank you. And now I understand why the first panel of next day is for students, because it's harder to wake up.
Thank you, Albisin, for reminding us of that important lesson learned that with Russian deep strike capabilities that there's as the Ukrainians deal with every day is the battlefield reaches deep into Europe, as you showed, sir. We'll move on to Yaroslav.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today, I am going to talk about my personal observations that are based on experience in two defensive battles in 2022 and 2023, Popasna and Bakhmut. I will not speak about anything specific, only general findings. The point is not at tactical details. It is what those fights reveal about sustaining operational tempo in defense. My thesis is simple. Operational tempo depends less on what you have at the start and more on what you can restore during the fight. When the system that restores combat power cannot keep pace with losses and expenditure, tempo collapses, and formations burn through reserve options earlier than planned. From my perspective, the decisive contest is between two systems. The first system is resource regeneration, replacement flow and integration, distribution reliability for critical supplies, movement under interdiction, and leadership continuity. The second system is resource consumption, casualties, expenditures, fatigue, and CT friction. Tempo sits in the middle. If regeneration stays reliable, you can keep tempo. If consumption outruns regeneration, tempo becomes unstable. A clear personal indicator that a formation has entered the endurance phase is what happens to replacements. When newcomers are committed with minimal integration time, it is signals that regeneration is being forced to match immediate consumption, rather than rebuilding depth. In that condition, staff decisions become a series of trade-offs between short-term survival and long-term coherence. Three practical levers matter in defense. The first one, maneuver capacity. The reserve should preserve freedom of action, restore coherence after shock, enable controlled repositioning, and buy time to reset, rather than serve as routine reinforcement. Once the reserve becomes a permanent plug for gaps, you lose options and initiative. Second, leadership continuity. Units and higher headquarters must maintain C2 even if the unit commander becomes a casualty. What to watch is simple. Does decision-making remain coherent and timely after leadership loss? Or does the battle rhythm breaks and priorities drift? Continuity isn't a personal issue. It is system design issue. The third, distribution reliability. Predictability often matters more than totals. If resupplies becomes erratic, even large stockpiles fail to translate into tempo at the point of need. Simple staff controls, such as daily expenditure limits, can preserve such capacity, enabling the formation to generate short bursts when required, rather than steadily exhausting itself. Based on these three practical levers, two implications are following for training and exercise design. The first one is connected to leadership continuity. Inject leadership attrition, replace key leaders and staff meet scenario. and measure whether headquarters sustain city coherence and battle rhythm without consuming the reserve to compensate for friction. The second one, inject a 48-hours disruption in resupply predictability, especially for key munitions, and observe where the commanders protect surge capacity and reserve options through prioritization and allocation, instead of spending the reserve to cover logistics failure. As a summary, if you do not design tactical combat power for regeneration, you won't have reserve options. And without reserve options, you won't sustain operational tempo. Thank you.
Thank you, Yaroslav. Move on to Thomas.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone, and I would like to start saying many thanks to Baltic Defense College, actually, for opportunities. And I take this panel as an opportunity, actually, so thank you indeed. And I'll use this 7, 8 or so minutes, actually, to talk resistance. And of course, one could think or say that there is nothing very new about it. You know, we have concepts developed, you know, and some applications available, or even think that it's not very actual, because we are not going to lose. Actually, resistance basically starts when we losing some territories. But I think, actually, my personal understanding is that despite our trust in collective defense, our preparedness, and all the measures and actions we take to deter the aggressor, and all what we do to be ready to defend our countries if deterrence fails, we cannot exclude worst case scenarios of temporary, partial, or full occupation of our territories. We have to think carefully. We have to be smart and innovative to prepare for the worst, not to be surprised. We, as a military, we do not like surprises. We have to, and actually, at this point, we have to look at Ukraine, actually, and as the topic is, we have to look at lessons not learned, just lessons that Ukraine provides to us. Their experience since the Russian invasion has provided the most significant real-world demonstration of national resistance and unconventional warfare in Europe in decades. The ongoing war in Ukraine and its resistance efforts offer us invaluable lessons, actually. And while looking what's happening in Ukraine, their resistance efforts, we can get this ground truths, actually, real understanding, you know, how it looks like in reality. And I have picked just 4 out of many, actually, just 4 overlapping aspects to talk and bring to your attention today. So first one is social resilience and preparations, or preparations and social resilience. Second one is assigned responsibilities. So basically, who is doing what, who is responsible for what while organizing and executing it. Third one is network development, and the last one is operational security. So, building effective resistance requires prior preparations, social resilience, and the ability to resist. Despite Ukrainians initiating the comprehensive defense concept in 2014, the system was not fully integrated to their national defense strategy until 7 years later. Ukraine enacted the legislation called on fundamentals of national resistance on 1st of January 2022. So basically 2 months before actual incursion by Russian forces. The implemented law assigned Ukrainian Special Operation Forces as an entity responsible for overall resistance activities. It also covered some territorial defense, some other aspects. And with volunteer territorial defense structures, local communities, and the whole of society mindset, Ukrainians were able to resist even where formal systems were incomplete. However, Ukrainian example shows that legal frameworks, rehearsed procedures, and social readiness must all be strong well before crisis occurs. By the time as invasion begins, reforms and preparations are already late. So it was first aspect from my list. And the message is what we have to start preparing right now, if not yesterday. Ukraine also demonstrates the importance of assigning responsibilities with clearly before conflict. Under Ukraine resistance law, as I just mentioned, their SOF were given full authority to organize, train, coordinate, and lead resistance activities. This is the only instance in modern SOF history. When I say modern, it's basically from Cold War to nowadays, where the national SOF is engaged in unconventional warfare against occupants on their own soil. This unity of command prevent fragmentation and ensured coherent action under extreme pressure. So the question is, and nobody has to answer it, but if we have learned this lesson, do we have by law assigned entities responsible for organizing the resistance? The third major lesson out of 4 is the importance of early network development. And of course, it's a part of preparations, actually. It's overlapping somehow. When we talk about networks, it is about logistics, intelligence, and non-standard communications. And we all, likely you all agree with me, that without logistics, without intelligence, it's hard or even impossible to execute effective operations, resistance operations. The Ukrainian resistance strongly recommends starting networking during peacetime. Ukrainian Special Operation Forces built local partisan networks in both rural and urban areas. Still, they began their preparations and network development far too late. A fact that was later reflected on the battlefield. Ukrainian professionals have repeatedly noted, suggested, advised, but these networks should have been built much earlier. So basically, we have to take this lesson very seriously. And network development must begin in peacetime, quietly, in close cooperation with, I just want to stress, emphasize here, with vetted and selected civilian authorities. Ukraine's experience is a clear warning for all of us. But a delayed network construction creates gaps that an adversary can exploit in the early phases of an invasion. Taking this fact, from our side, we can say and think that if we have no networks developed, it's our resistance likely be ineffective. And again, rather rhetorical question, have we developed networks? And I think we have, especially Lithuanians, Latvians, Estonians, we have a feeling, about the answer. And I do understand, and we all understand, but it's not easy task to do so. There are many legal and resource-based limitations to doing so. And we can think about logistics, for example, about dispersion of means and Class 5 ammunition in particular. During peacetime, we have many limitations to do so, legal in particular ones. But we have not much options, actually. We have to find other ways doing so. Because if not, it can have severe consequences later. Finally, Ukraine offers a crucial lesson in operational security. Russian forces are conducting targeted filtration in occupied territories, arrests and killings. When the war began, the occupiers used and continue to use Stalin's methods. No surprise, right? We had detailed lists of people associated with government and force structures whom they simply eliminated after. This lesson must be assimilated by every nation, by every entity preparing for a resistance. In many cases, we remain vulnerable. due to social media, databases, even people who potentially could be part of a resistance belonging to one or another, let's say, club, kind of hunting club or scouts or whatever. So basically, all of these bringing some risks and which causes this operational security drawbacks. Operational security overlaps with requirements for network development, overall preparations, and the execution of resistance operations. In conclusion, or summing up, Ukraine's experience provides many, but I brought 4 critical lessons for Baltic states. Resilience and preparations must be continuous and society-wide. Network development must begin early. Assigned responsibilities must be legally and operationally clear long before crisis occurs. And again, if we have no assigned particular entity who is responsible for organizing, executing it, so what to talk about networks development and overall organization, training, whatever, all the aspects. And the last one, the operational security must be strict and the actions compartmentalized and adapted to wartime realities, where secrecy determines survival. So if we have learned these lessons, implemented in our strategies, in our concepts, it's perfect actually. We're advancing. If we have thought about them, if we analyzing them, it's good. But if we have done nothing, if we have this position, as I call passive observer, we have to think again. Actually, we have to think again, and be ready, to take consequences of not doing something, instead of planning and assessing what Ukraine brings to us. So basically, that's all what I had. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Thomas. Yeah, obviously we have 4 great panelists here that all have their own distinct topics, all kind of interrelated and connected. I was going to remind at this point that they have Slido where you can present your questions, but as I see here, I don't need to remind you. There's quite a bit coming in already. But I'm going to kind of break it down and give you each one question to start with between Slido and some of my thoughts, and then we'll move on. And if you have a question specifically for one of the panel members directed towards them, or if you just in general looking for somebody in the panel to answer, which I see some of the Slido ones are looking for some opinions generally on the lessons learned, then please ask them, and then any of you guys can take it for the general questions. But I'll start with Thomas on the end and go into something near and dear to my heart as well. Go to the Special Operations Officers is the resistance. And as you look at this, as you said, it's lessons, but it's not lessons learned yet. How do you turn some of those things you propose there into a lesson learned? You could apply it to Lithuania or any of the Baltic states from your experience that becomes something you could adapt now, and you think you should start moving forward now in order to have an effective resistance and take advantage of those things if in time comes that you need it.
I think actually what there are kind of actually SOF is defined by ethos of warrior, flexibility, and creativity. I think what Robert Spulak brings this definition, and I think what kind of conveying these features, in particular flexibility and creativity to our nations, actually. I think what we have to be very smart, actually, creative and flexible, while adapting all the lessons, bringing them to our concepts for Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, actually. Because we are different, actually. Our population, size of the populations are different, and our culture is different. So we have to be very, very smart with this. And if to take an example of taking responsibilities, actually, in Ukrainian case, it's special operation forces. If it applies for Baltic states, it's a matter of planning, actually, And simply, if SOF has having a small SOF with a wide range of tasks, so it's a question, big question mark, if it's still, if it could be additional task, taking overall resistance for SOF again. And if to compare actually size, to provide you like a example, how different we are, So when we talk SOF, and we don't mention exact numbers, but we can get this understanding, feeling, comparing populations actually, numbers of populations. Ukrainian is basically 44 million, right? 45, while Lithuania is less than 3, 2.5. So basically the ratio is 1 to 15. So if Lithuanian SOF can take overall responsibility of organizing resistance, big question. If just this tasks, maybe. So basically my message is and answer is that we have to be very smart, and it's a matter of planning actually.
Thank you.
One correction, that in Russia is 1 million less than it was mentioned after war, when war started.
It was
Yeah, but just a joke.
All right, thank you. James, my question for you is, it's very, very bold to present your as analogy of American baseball and defense spending, but I think there's some definite good lessons learned there. But I said, use any analogy for comparison, and I think there's going to be a flaw. There's where it breaks down. How does your analogy break down and not apply? I think of, obviously, baseball teams can't cooperate and have alliances to help them out as well. Like, what did you find as your biggest flaw in your argument in that comparison?
So I think one of the big things is mistaking cost for effectiveness. So cheaper cost doesn't ultimately mean it can be more effective. So take a $3 million Patriot missile. It is extremely effective at shooting down a $30,000 self-flying missile. But at what cost? If you were to apply a Money-a-Baltic approach to it, you're going to be able to produce over time more $30,000 missiles than I'm going to be able to produce $3 million missiles. So in order to produce platforms at scale, it also takes time to create $3 million missiles compared to $30,000 drones, if that's the case. So the biggest pitfall is essentially looking at cost and effectiveness, not cost effectiveness, and making sure you're integrating something that is cheaper potentially into an overall system at cost and at scale. So if I can buy $5,000 sensors, but they don't talk to anything, well, that's not very effective, even if it is cheaper. So as a matter of point of defense, is I can buy $30,000 drones, and now they're significantly more effective at cost than $3 million missiles, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Thank you. All right, Almanis, moving on to you. Good question I have here is, what's the, it ties into to James's presentation, so what's the most cost-effective countermeasure? You talked about hardening, talked about intercepting. I used to have the map that there's a lot of territory to cover when we're talking long-range Russian fires. What's the most cost-effective measure?
So I just want to emphasize that I'm not air defense or artillery background officer, but from what we observe from the open sources in Lock and Loaded Center, that of course the Ukrainians possibly know better, but that we can group them into, these countermeasures into, let's say, 4 categories. First is the passive, or the cover and concealment, deception, when you save your units, save your facilities. The other is, of course, deep strike capabilities that they used against like I mentioned in my slide, in my presentation, against the enemy, the Russians, launching sites, some storages, Shahed storages, or other long-range drones facilities, production facilities where the parts are produced in Russia. So we can say Flamingo, for example, is a good example. It's not so, it's cheap, comparing with sophisticated Western industry. The missiles that Western countries produce is cheaper, but it's sophisticated. It can hit the targets, it can reach the purpose. So deep strike capabilities, countering the enemy's deep strike capabilities. So the third, it's kinetic ones. So the old school air defense that we all know, mainly produced by the Ukrainians or from the Western Europe, different types. So we can say from NASAMS to IRIS-T and the long-range Patriots and etc. And then the fourth category, we can say that it's non-kinetic. So mainly the electronic warfare tools that they used to disable the drone that they confusing and they going to the not to the target that they were programmed but to the other directions. So mainly four categories.
Categories versus specific.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
And but of course we need to understand that the mass that they sending every day. So the drones they creating a mass like there's sometimes hundreds of them. And they just giving a fog, some kind of fog for the missiles. They just, with this mass, they covering the more precise strikes with the cruise missiles, with the ballistic missiles, and
Well, thank you.
One comment to Jim. Jim, next time if you will presenting in Baltics, use not baseball. We don't play baseball here. We play basketball, ice hockey.
It doesn't compare. It doesn't scale.
All right, Yaroslav, talk about another difficult question you tackled there is tempo in the defense. It's almost a contradiction in itself and how you maintain the tempo in the defense. But it's very, very good, well thought out of those three levers that that you're using in the Ukraine and to try to manage the tempo there. But outside of those levers that you're using, what's the most influential thing to your tempo that undermines your operational tempo that's outside of your control as a planner?
In terms of logistics, I could say that one of the most limitation factors are the enemy. I mean, the enemy's ability to strike, the logistical roads, the bridges, the supply lines, railways junctions. I think this is a factor that can limit operational tempo.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna swing back to James because we had an early question almost immediately after you presented that somebody is obviously a Moneyball fan as well who pointed out that it was a market inefficiency that created that opportunity for the A's is also this possibly just a market inefficiency. What happens when the big teams, the big spenders, start using the same tactics?
Yeah, so at this point, vulnerability is essentially mutual. The battle space is essentially transparent. Everybody has the drones. You don't need a $10 or $20 million MQ-9 anymore to create the same situational awareness as $25,000 drones, loitering drones do. It creates the same situational awareness. And in reality, it's kind of the point. You can't defend every target, and we're learning that very quickly right now. It's not about abandoning the defense. It's really what you're going to see in the next couple of weeks, probably with a lot of stuff in the Middle East, is you're going to end up picking your battles significantly, and you're going to end up having to understand what's actually critical to maintain tempo and capacity, and essentially what can be lost. And you'll see that with some of the strikes in the Middle East right now. There are things that the U.S. is just not protecting anymore, or maritime space that we are giving up to create or maintain initiative for our aircraft and air superiority. So it goes both ways in terms of offense and defense. You also have to look at the Moneyball approach in terms of cost effectiveness that way as well. And again, you can't shoot a $30,000 drone down with a $3 million missile. You're going to lose, give it a month, you're going to lose billions of dollars compared to hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just not affordable. And I think a really good lesson from Ukraine was they found drone interceptors that are intercepting drones with drones at cost. And that's something I have not seen from, mind you, my limited major experience of where the U.S. or some of our NATO allies are making drone interceptors for drones because we're taking the pages right out of the Ukrainian playbook to try to bring that scale down, because I can't scale 7,000 Patriot missiles like the Ukrainians are currently scaling 7 million drones. It's just not possible. The technology isn't there yet, maybe, but until I can scale that kind of defense at that effective ratio of a Patriot missile, I have to find a cheaper and better alternative to shooting a $30,000 Shahed down with a $3 million rocket. I can't sustain it. And the case in point is I'm going to end up running out of Patriot missiles before the enemy runs out of $20,000 drones at production capacity, if that makes sense. So you have to pick your battles until you can scale that, or you can shift that money Baltic mindset. Because even I don't know unclassified how many Patriot batteries are here in the Baltics, if any. But it without them and without a lot of significant shore-ed capabilities, it becomes very difficult to shoot down 100 Shahed drones or even 5 ballistic missiles. You get overwhelmed very quickly. So there has to be some cost-benefit, cost-effectiveness trade-offs there. And picking what defense you can money Baltic around it and defend compared to what you're going to end up losing inevitably anyways. There's no way to avoid vulnerability on either side at this point.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, so the funny fact, that not funny, but the Russians, they are scaling what is working. So they're scaling Shaheds when they take this simple technology from the Iranians and they're scaling it. It's because it's working, you know? And also they're scaling the gliding bombs, or in Russian is Характерированная авиабомба. But
I don't speak Russian.
Yeah. This is the old fabs, old Soviet fabs. They just put some wings on that, you know, and they make it working, and they're using it. And for us, lessons identified from this point is the headquarters of the battalions of brigades, because now it's from my slide. Maybe you saw that it's like 100 kilometers. And there is even tested in more than like up to 140, 200 kilometers. So, and what our lesson identified that we should put our headquarters even further from the front lines, from the zero, because we are like, we can be destroyed very easily.
Very vulnerable.
Very vulnerable.
And again, that kind of proves the point is you're going to have to create at cost, at scale, C2 nodes that are resilient. And if one goes down, another server or another stack can maintain that COP. When a brigade, there's no, and this is crazy because I've been to NTC, JRTC, I'm sure you have too, sirs. You see these giant Taj Mahals, these huge mahals of entire brigade cities. Well, the Ukrainian argument has proved that lasts for about a day.
We should disperse it
yeah.
sometime. Yeah.
So buying things that will, and it's not just drones, it's buying C2 systems and architecture that will maintain resilience at cost. If I have to buy $1 million server stacks to maintain a very expensive AI integrated targeting system, sure, that's great. But once that $1 million system goes down, now I've just lost $1 million system and have no SA, versus a bunch of smaller $30,000 server stacks that are at every company, every battalion, and now I can whack-a-mole my C2 and my fires architecture, my drone architecture, whatever that looks like, at cost, and it's dispersed and resilient in comparison to a giant talk.
And we see that it's not enough to have just tactical main and rear command post. We need to even spread them even more to the nodes, like the small ones, by 5 people or something.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
All right. That's good stuff. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm sure we'll probably come back to that discussion more. I think that's at the center of a lot of the interest also, I see from the questions. But I also have one from a higher command studies course that thinks towards Yaroslav in your ballpark, but all of you could feel free to pitch it on this one. And it's, as you look at the current battlefield in Ukraine, what's it going to take to get out of the defense and get back into the offense and reassert temper and maneuver warfare? Back to what do you think needs to be brought into the battlefield to change the current construct that you're under in Ukraine?
Can you rephrase the question, please?
rephrase it that we currently have how the battle is working down? It's very stagnant at the front lines. What will it take to change that stagnation to get back where there's actually maneuver warfare happening versus the trench warfare that much of the war is defined by right now?
So that's quite complex and difficult question because it's like if you know the correct answer for this question, it is possible to win the war immediately. So I will say it's probably to know the right balance between regenerations and consumptions, to know when to put efforts in the right time and right place, and also it's a resource issue. I mean, human resources, I mean, ammo, different military vehicles, equipment. So, yeah.
You can blame my classmates' higher command study course. They're really tough questions to solve the war. All right. So I'll shift down. I got one for Thomas also coming in Slido. And it's asking from the Ukrainian resistance mechanisms that you looked at that are in place. What are the activities that helps them align their activities to the military plans, and what are some of those lessons you could cross over? Like how does that interaction with what their operations are doing with the rest of the military's plans with the resistance? How does that overlap, and are they how they're able to do that today, and how they could apply that for the other NATO states?
Actually, it's hard to answer the question, actually, because most of operations, actually, and their activities are compartmentalized, matter of operational security. But I think what in most of the cases, resistance operations run by RESCOM, actually, as a separate part of their software architecture, SOCOM architecture. So basically, in some way, are coordinated with SOF activities, with their SOF activities. How much they coordinated with land forces operations, I can't tell. I don't know, actually. But I think in most of the cases, it's kind of separate efforts, contributing, to particular effects. I think it's organized this way.
It's easy to cross over into other classification levels when you start talking about resistance and what's useful.
Exactly, and I think when we talk about these resistance operations, this operational security, compartmentalization. It's a hard English word, to pronounce for Lithuanian, but I think it's a matter of highest importance, actually. So all the networks, when we talk about the networks, if it's become open, it's not a network, actually. It can't be like an effective one. So I think, and as you talk to Ukrainians, basically the lowest amount of people know about particular operations, which are going to be executed, So simple principle need to know, actually, is implemented everywhere. So, and if they do some synchronized, not synchronized, but kind of operations, land forces, SOF. So basically, just a limited amount of people know about kind of effect they generate, separately. So that would be an answer, I think.
Good answer. And I think at this point, I'm going to open up to the audience for questions with the microphone. So you have one here.
Let me take opportunity and advantage that I already have my own mic. So first of all, thank you very much for our first wake up panel. It worked much better than coffee. So I have a question to Lieutenant Colonel Thomas. If a smaller actor willingness to resist can already weaken the image of stronger power, how should strategic leaders organize resistance so that this courage translates into real strategic impact?
How you mean how having small units, small entities to make them look like big ones, right?
If somebody smaller is not afraid to stand up against something bigger, how to make it strategic advantage?
By the leadership. Yeah, so I think, it has to be, how to say, if to talk from a soft perspective, actually, we always do this, like a small entities achieving like a strategic effects,
Force
and
multiplier.
doing a lot. And I think that this soft example actually could reflect, and answer to your question, actually. So it's not, it couldn't be done like in short time, It has to be developed, and it comes, through training, through selection. Particular people have to be selected, for particular tasks. And of course, as you mentioned, leadership, it also has like a significant importance, to motivate people. Motivation, one of the factors, how to make like a small entities, effective fight while fighting, like a big enemy formations, So, and I think its answer is, but to achieve this, it's a kind of complex of means, and it's not a kind of easy achievable thing, And the SOF in particular is an example, And how SOF operates, how it's achieved by SOF. It's basically through the selection, through the training, through the particular equipment we have, and that could be, conveyed, reflected, into resistance operations, I think.
One short comment also to answering. We can observe it in Ukraine when for example, a railway line is damaged by the resistance that is in the Ukrainian occupied territory, and they create a strategic effect because the Russian logistics is based on land-based logistics, mainly the railway-based logistics, to be honest. So that's the strategic effect.
And another point, maybe, so basically taking Ukrainian example, actually, we're fighting for the nation. So it comes in some way naturally, we know what the enemy is like a bigger one, and going by mass, as it was pointed yesterday, actually. But once you fight, for your country, actually, for your values, for your family, so basically it's a kind of biggest motivator actually to fight and not to be afraid actually of a bigger.
Go ahead.
Also, in my opinion, it is possible to use more horizontal-based approaches instead of vertical one. It can help. Smaller entities to win, and also it's would be beneficial to have better trainings, better educations. It also would be very beneficial.
And one theme I've noticed across Thomas's entire presentation, it reminds me there's 7 soft truths that US SOCOM has, and one of them is you can't mass produce soft in time of crisis. You have to prepare, as I say, with the resistance, you have to think about it, prepare ahead of time because it's too late once the crisis actually happens. So you have to plan these things well ahead of time.
What does mobilization look like now? What does rehearsals look like now? How does that look legally? It's defining those objectives now, instead of, like you said, it's before it's too late.
We're doing this in Baltics, but of course it could be better and more true.
All right, we had a question right here. Go there.
Hey,
I'm sorry, I didn't see you there.
The mic moves around the college, so it's fine. So, good morning, gentlemen. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you stepping up and creating this interesting, very important panel. So really, thank you so much. And all the aspects you are covering are very, very important and really makes a lot of thoughts how to make it better, how to learn. And yes, this is difficult to be first in the morning, but you're doing well. Short question from mine to Thomas, because you're touching upon also very, very, critical area of resistance. This is probably no crystal ball to answer many related questions, but I heard you providing some of very good thoughts about segments that could be extremely important in organizing this type of operations. But since you are on a strategic level course, I want also to ask you to visualize it from your perspective. How would you see this command and control within this resilience operation, line of operation? how you would see from your perspective, because it's much more than military part, much more than that. If you could take up from this perspective, though, I'd appreciate the comments. Thank you.
I would say it's two different things. It's planning. It's one thing which has to be done in involving, strategic level, and just general concept, how we are doing it, who is responsible for what. So basically, yes, of course, it has to include all the levels, starting, from highest ones, to going to ministries, and of course, selecting and I would say involving particular people, actually keeping this principle of need to know. But when it comes, to execution, actually, so it has to be decentralized. I really think about it and believe in it. And I think that a good model, and actually we don't need to reinvent the wheel, actually. One of the options could be, to take, to employ this thinking in time method, and to see, for example, how it was executed during Second World War, and in particular Jedburgh's concept. Of course, it was a bit different, when Brits and Americans were coming, to France, and organizing small resistance groups, and basically contributing to these strategic effects, actually. So it could be an option also, for us. Maybe not somebody coming from a side, but maybe some entities, approved by higher, having authorities, doing their business, organizing small teams, developing networks, and not necessarily, having like a very hierarchical structures, or something. So I think that in strategic level has to be like a general concept approved, particular entities assigned, who is responsible, and afterwards it has to be like a pushed, to the lowest level possible, and to be, authorized for a kind of execution. So that could be an answer. But it's a matter of planning, actually, and yeah, if I answer the question.
Oh, sure. So before I move on, you had your hand up for the very first one here. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Edwards. I'm from Latvian MOD. Let's imagine a situation sometime in the future that Russia attacks Baltic states, taking into account lessons learned from Ukraine and the fact that Baltic states do not have strategic depth and Russia has advanced drone units. How effective and dangerous could be operational siege put by Russia on Suwalki corridor just by using drones and electronic warfare? Thank you.
Open it up if
Just
anybody has
opinions. So we need to make Suwalki corridor, our corridor, is a gap for them. So we need to put it like, to be honest, we need to destroy Kaliningrad, all the A2AD in the Kaliningrad, and of course to hold the corridor. But I disagree that we don't have a depth, because in the military we see not a land, we see the area, and we have the area, the Baltic Sea, of course, area to the west. And for example, from Klaipėda, it's our seaport in Lithuania, it's closer to the Stockholm than from Klaipėda to the Vilnius. So in some kind of way, it's just matters of capabilities and what our allies bringing to the Baltic Sea. And then if we control the Baltic Sea, we eliminate the Kaliningrad, then we have a depth, we can use it.
good answer.
If I may to add, actually, there is another option, actually, how to increase this strategic depth. Actually, to push the fight, to the other side.
Enemy, adversary side, of course.
All right, back there.
Hi, my name is Elisa. I'm from Joint Force Command Brunsum. As a civilian, very humble outside observer of the conflict in Ukraine, it sometimes seems that, there's not that much that can surprise in terms of or break the course of the conflict. But one of the most recent things that happened is that SpaceX, Musk, cut off Russian access to these unauthorized Starlink's stations, and it actually had an effect, right? I mean, Russian operations were in sort of a disarray, and Ukrainians were able to fight back. So my question, from your various perspectives, what are the lessons learned in terms of not just like communications and security, but equally also like maybe contracting policies? What are the various lessons we can learn from this? Thank you.
Yeah, so I will say that was, I think 2023, end of 2020, probably end of 2023, they decided they were going to support targeting using Starlink. And that's a very valid point, right? The kill chains the Ukrainians were using as a lesson learned for NATO, and we've taken that. I think we've taken that, is that certain kill chains are very fragile, specifically SATCOM, utilizing commercial infrastructure. And I think the Ukrainians, as well as the Russians, are still using some of those systems, specifically SATCOM, for some more resilient mesh networks. But I would argue that NATO and the alliance has taken that, specifically the mesh network capabilities, and dispersed that, and really brought down a lot of that risk, specifically with, I would say, dispersed server systems and stacks, and dispersed command and control at specific nodes, so that where if I had a centralized C2 SATCOM node that was managing a kill chain from an exquisite sensor to a Ukrainian shooter, and this chain is disrupted via EW, or Elon Musk just deciding to turn off the juice, there are other dispersed architectures around, really more resilient architecture that we as Alliance could utilize, lessons learned wise, to turn those on, and I would say we've done that, or we are working towards that in terms of combined joint all domain, like situational awareness, if you want a really nice buzzword. It's managing the find and fix outside of SATCOM, and then utilizing and pushing down a lot of that track and target, which is really where the failure, that fragility was of the SATCOM communication structure. We're pushing a lot of that down, I think, lower echelons, so we're mitigating a lot of that, if that answers your question.
Regarding how to mitigate the risks, it's just possible to use different types of communication systems. It can be the old-fashioned wired phones. It can be different types of radios. For internet using, it's not only Starlink. It exists other tools like military internet tools, Starlink, and other business-oriented tools that military can use and implement at daily lives.
And it's obvious that some units in Russia, they don't have this base plan, the primary alternative and all. So when you're using one, then you're switching to another. If Starlink not working, we're using alternative mean of communications and so on. So but that's work. That's work for the war.
All right. I think we have time for one more question out there. See, you got something right here? Good question there? Yeah.
Where's my plant? Did I plant?
Third row.
Thank you very much. I start to be fast. My question regarding the lessons for Europe and the United States. I want to ask that for example, when I'm writing about the infantry squads in the Russian army and in the Ukrainian army in 2024 for the Hungarian Military Academy, that things what I wrote there, now it's I would say totally useless, because the war is changing constantly. Also, when I go to Ukraine, I'm asking the soldiers, I usually get that question to Artur, do you remember what I said last time? I said yes. Okay, now forget it. Because there is also, the medics are saying that in the beginning of the war, the artillery was the biggest casualties what made for the Ukrainian army, now the drones, and so and so. So it's constantly changing. I want to ask that to now, for the European army and the United States Army, how we are learning from the war, how we are learning about it, and did we already did some changes in the military structures, or we are still waiting for the correct time to analyze it more and more, or there was maybe some changes what we already did, and now we see that too, it's maybe not even working. Thank you very much.
So I agree that adaptation in war is crucial, to adapt. But always there is a complex approach or complexity of different tools working the best. When for example, in the States, you have a huge armed forces, so you can have a lot of tools different. So maybe for small countries, for small nations, it's harder. But still, the complexity, because we have this, say in the public in Lithuania discussion, the tanks versus drones. So the tanks is the old ones, the drones is the new ones. So why we need tanks? We can have drones, but the drones won't hold the ground. They won't occupy the territory. They won't military term occupy, and they hold the territory. So you can with drones, of course, they are giving a huge effect. Of course, we should integrate, and in Lithuanian armed forces, we're integrating them. But the other side of this, the dark side, that you cannot buy a lot of drones and put in the storage, because they will be old, like you said. War is changing, and after a couple months, there will be a new optical wire or a new system or a Starlink or some other things, or the new engine, for example, in Shaheds we now observe. So there will be some changes, and you need to adapt to this. So we need to create the logistical chains, industry that can adapt for the changes.
But if I may to add, actually, what you just said, so we don't need actually to put, drones, in the storage.
Agree. That's my point.
But we need actually to put our experience and knowledge actually into the storage. So that is the main point, because everything is so dynamic. Actually, everything is changing. But understanding plays the most important role.
Absolutely.
And also adding, what I think what we have implemented a lot. Lessons learned, as Almin is saying, about all these drones, we have created the different structures. We did a lot. But in some cases, we still tend, to have this, as I call this, position of passive observer. We do understand what's something happening, what it's effective on the battlefield, but still struggling, to implement into our TPs or whatever.
And we have these lessons learned systems, I think, in all armed forces. But the question is how to jeopardize, how to improve them to be faster as we can, because we need to learn faster than we now are learning, I think.
Absolutely. Good answers. I'll add one thing from my perspective. As I said, my biography, my last job was as a battalion commander for a basic training battalion. And one of the things we're doing is just changing some of the fundamentals there. When they're first learning to patrol, they're looking 360 now, not just on the ground. They're looking above them and introduce drones into their patrolling, which we have to almost retrain some of our infantrymen at this point because they're so used to having air dominance, they're never looking up. And just having that instilled early on and in some of those early fundamentals of training or some of the baseline lessons learned. Everything's always adapting, but there are some very, very, baseline things that we're adding to training and to our tactics as well. So, but on that note, I'll thank the panelists. I appreciate all your time and preparation on this. These guys have all dedicated extra time into this, aside from their classwork and research papers to be able to present today. So please give them all a round of applause for their work.
Very well done. What a great way to start today. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, panelists. That was exceptional. So we will have our first coffee break of the day before our 5th panel of the conference. So I would kindly ask you to be back at 43 past because we'll kick it off with panel 5 at 10:45. Enjoy your coffee.